Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Government of India, we have the press conference of the Minister of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Anand Sharma. We also have the members of the Indian delegation who are here for the WTO meetings. The Minister will make a brief opening statement, after which the floor will be open for questions. The Minister will take questions only from members of the media. I request you to please identify yourself before you ask the question. I also request you to ensure that your mobile phones are switched off or are in the silent mode. Thank you.
A very good morning to all of you. As you are following the ongoing WTO meeting, I wish to share with you India's position, our assessment. India has been engaged in the ongoing negotiations for many months in Geneva with all sincerity and in the most constructive of manners. India has made an acknowledged contribution in taking forward not only the agenda for this meeting in Geneva, but also on all the three pillars, the three main issues on which negotiations were going on, to arrive at a solution which is acceptable, which embraces all. We live in a world where countries have different levels of development and the challenges differ from a nation to nation and continent to continent. But a vast majority of the world lives in poor countries, in developing countries, in Asia, in Africa, in South America and the Caribbean. It is a fact that those engaged in agriculture in these countries happen to be resource poor and subsistence farmers. Where agriculture, technologies in many of the poor countries, not in India, may not be as it is available for farming in many of the developed countries. But at the same time, for a country like India, and when we talk of this, we talk on behalf of similarly placed countries whom I will refer to as our partners in this coalition of countries which are developing, countries which have a challenge of food security, countries which have the issues concerning the subsistence farmers. This is one issue which we thought should be and needs to be addressed so that that's why United Nations has a rapporteur on hunger and food security, Mr. Shooter. And regularly the reports are presented on hunger and food security issues to the United Nations. We also have a commitment to the Millennium Development Goals, MDGs. The countries which are represented in the WTO are also signatories, have also made commitments to the MDGs, as well as to the right to food. Therefore, any decision which we make while putting in place the agreements, particularly on agriculture, on food security, have to be in harmony with the MDGs and the right to food security, cannot and must not be in conflict with these noble goals of the global community as a whole. This is a principled position for India, and it should not be misinterpreted as India entering into a dispute. We have urged, with respect, all members to consider this aspect so that the decisions that we make resonate in the poor and the developing countries where people are genuinely concerned as to what will emerge out of Bali. In India, we have a food security program, and the public stock holding for food security is the proposal which is under discussion. There are other issues, trade facilitation, and also the LDC issues. Out of the 10 texts which were negotiated in Geneva, these are draft texts. India has endorsed 8. This is just to underscore that India is as much committed as any other nation to have a successful outcome in Bali. But at the same time, there are issues on trade facilitation where some countries, including India, may be required to change the domestic laws, and countries find it difficult to make those commitments. However, these are areas, this particular chapter, India has very successfully steered the negotiations in Geneva. The crunch is the issue of public stock holding for food security. I would like to explain to you the manner in which this issue is addressed under the WTO agreement and rules. The countries are allowed to have public stock holding, public procurement, but there is a threshold called the de minimis. Now this is linked to the past agreement, the Uruguay Round Agreement, and for the calculation purposes, our chief negotiator later and the ambassador to WTO will step in if more clarification will be required. So for the calculation purposes of de minimis, the reference prices that are used of 1986 to 1988. So in 2013, all our countries have to calculate the de minimis for the eligible procurement based on 1986 to 1988 prices. We have been pleading that these prices need to be updated. First, the last agreement was a flawed agreement. It had an inherent imbalance loaded against the developing countries, loaded against the poor countries. The different staple foods which are procured to feed the poor people. It is procured at a MSP, that is the minimum support price. It is not income support or market support which developed countries distributed as part of the food security. Until recently, it was through the public distribution. obliged to ensure that the prescribed, notified quantity of food per month is made available as per their legal entitlement. We cannot possibly be expected to negotiate something which is in direct conflict with our food security. India is not the only country which gives MSP to its farmers. Large number of countries, and we have the list, which have the similar program. At least 15 odd countries, if not more, have notified schemes for food security and public procurement. We have been discussing a number of possible options so that we come, while negotiating these things, to the second decade of the 21st century and not be held hostage to the 1980s. We are willing to and open to discuss the trade facilitation because India itself has been committed. We have taken a number of steps over the years to rationalize and simplify when it comes to trade rules, to update our own infrastructure, induct the latest of technologies, to cut down transaction costs, simplification of custom rules. We have electronically linked all our export-import terminals. There is electronic data interchangeability which is done. The entire trading component, when it comes to filing, when it comes to determination or payment of fees to the bank or duties, and the bank realization certificates, it's all electronic in India. So when we are talking about it, we understand the use of simplifying trade, faster shipments, which helps countries which produce. I would also like to add, before I rest my opening statement, that India has been talking to various groups and our coalition partners and key stakeholders. We have had a number of negotiations with the EU, with the United States of America, and also with the Africa group, with the ACP group, with the LDCs. In the past also, when there has been a shared concern over the stalemate in the Doha round of negotiations, it was India which took the initiative, and I had the honor of hosting as India's minister the ministers and leaders in New Delhi in September 2009 with an effort and objective to re-energize the stalled talks, and it did help as the negotiators returned to Geneva. India is for the strengthening of the multilateral trading system. India stands for the strengthening of the WTO. We are for a rule-based multilateral trade system which corrects historical distortions, which is fair, which is just, and which is equitable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. The floor is now open for questions. Thank you. Yes, please. Request you to identify yourself when you ask the question.
Sam Gilston with Washington Tariff and Trade Letter. Mr. Minister, it's my understanding that India already exceeds the de minimis requirements of the Uruguay round commitments and in many different crops, and has not been challenged by any other country regarding these excessive support. So why do you need an agreement now for a peace clause or dual restraint since you've already exceeded it?
I think I had already answered this in great detail, but just for your benefit, With all respect, your information is wrong. We are not in breach. I would say it emphatically. So, number one. Number two, when you are talking about, you refer to Uruguay round, I've myself said it is inherently flawed and unfairly balanced against the poor and developing countries, and that's why the ongoing negotiations, that's why we want this calculation to be not dated but updated and to be brought to the 21st century.
Yes, please. Can we have the mic here, please?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me? My name is Gunilla von Hall. I am a Swedish journalist. I work for Svenska Dagbladet, Swedish Daily. I have two questions. My first question is, if there's no deal here in Bali, wouldn't you be worse off as you then risk being challenged at the WTO for breaching WTO rules? Can you hear me?
No, if you could be louder, please. No, please, I want to hear it directly.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
You tell me.
I'll take it again. Okay. If there's no deal here in Bali, wouldn't you then risk being worse off as you risk being challenged at WTO for breaching WTO rules? My second question is, you have...
Can we restrict it to one question, please? We'll come back if there's time. Just one question at a time, please.
Okay. You answer first.
Why are we negotiating then? Why are we having any negotiations then? The same would apply then also to trade facilitation. Why do we have a multilateral trading organization? And should we have decisions frozen in time? We are negotiating because the food prices have gone up, as I mentioned. We are negotiating because their legal entitlement to food security. This is primarily a sovereign right and a sovereign space. But as a responsible nation, as a rule-based and rule-governed democracy, we are discussing this G33 proposal so that the rules as such and the agreements of the multilateral trade organization are connected with the realities on ground of the 21st century. I would also like to add here, for the benefit of all, that unlike rich countries, our agriculture is primarily rain-fed. And the agricultural holdings of Indian farmers, the average holding is 1.2 acre of land in a nation of 1.25 billion people. These are the hard realities on the ground.
Yes, please, the gentleman here. Yes.
Hello? Do you hear me, sir?
I can.
Okay. Hi, my name is Hiro Maiga. I'm a Japanese journalist based in Geneva, working for the Asahi Shimbun, Japanese newspaper. Thank you very much for taking my questions. I have one question as a minister. So politically speaking, is this your position that you explained is anything to relate it to the upcoming election? And what does it mean in terms of political meaning? Thank you.
I think this is again a misperception. Democracies do have elections, but democracies have principles and convictions. Is this being discussed in Bali in December 2013? My dear friend, this proposal emanates from the Hong Kong ministerial meeting of the year 2005. This is an old proposal. India has not suddenly remembered that there are going to be elections and pulled a rabbit out of the hat. That's not the case. This is an 8-year-old proposal which has been discussed and rediscussed, negotiated and renegotiated many times. And those who are in the knowledge of developments, in the year 2008, even after the near collapse in June, the agreement on agriculture continued to be negotiated, and what the G33 proposal is. Actually, this is not what is in the draft text. The original G33 proposal. G33 have shown flexibility and lowered the ambition just to ensure that there is a consensus. But of 2008 Rev 4, that's the revised fourth draft on agriculture, it is the unbracketed portion. This means it was the settled part of the agreement on agriculture as on December 2008. And people must respect that what was accepted after negotiations in the year 2008.
Yes, the lady here, please.
No, I will not answer non-journalist.
Minister, do you hear me? No. Do you hear me now? My name is Rachel. I work for a Brazilian. You hear me now?
Louder.
Yeah. My name is Rachel. I work for a Brazilian newspaper, Folha de São Paulo. I would like to know, with the tests that are on the table today, do you see any solution? And is India willing to present a new proposal, perhaps with other countries?
I have a counter question. When out of 10 texts, India has endorsed 8 and willing even to negotiate the outstanding issues in the TF chapter, can we barter away or compromise when it comes to a fundamental right to food security? I would like to make this absolutely clear that we have not come here as petitioners to beg for a peace clause. Restrained from what? That it is binding on us to accept 1986 to 1988 prices and make ourselves vulnerable to disputes and calculations? The answer is a firm no. This is an area, this is a fundamental issue, we will never compromise.
Can we have the mic here, please, on the front
That
row?
Indian fellow is not journalist. Nahi hai.
Thank you.
I'm a journalist from Inside U.S. Trade in Washington. I guess I just wanted to ask you, the Director General Azevedo and many of the other members, are very, very interested in getting a deal by the end of this meeting, and they have asked Director General Azevedo to continue his consultations. So have you participated in the consultations with him, and what has been your interaction with him and other ministers to try to resolve this issue? Because if not, many people are going to point to India as the problem, that the reason this ministerial failed.
Frankly speaking, I find it's very amusing that a country which is standing up for a right which is acknowledged by the United Nations and the MDG goals, that country should be blamed for speaking for the right to food security for hundreds of millions, or rather billions, of poor people on this planet. We are not in conflict. We are urging not for a compromise, but for a consensus on this fundamental issue. Should it only be for the developing and the poor countries to keep on compromising and show flexibility when it is the very right to life, that is the right to food security, is connected with that. When they are in trade facilitation, developing and poor countries in particular, have been asked to make binding commitments. Here, a 4-year grace period, unacceptable.
Yes, the gentleman here, please. Can we have the mic here, please? Thank you.
Just one sentence I need to add for your benefit, that it is India speaks for the vast majority of poor people in the developing countries and the poor countries. India is not alone.
Yeah, Jean-Pierre Kapp from Neue Zürcher Zeitung, Swiss daily paper. I just wanted to ask you how an average Indian farmer with 1.2 acres would be able to benefit from your program. I mean, he doesn't produce enough to sell anything, so it wouldn't make sense just to buy food on normal market prices and distribute then.
I would like to invite you to India to see how much they produce. Because if they were not producing enough, there is no country in the world which can feed 1.2 billion Indians.
Yes, please. Yes, please, can we have the mic here, please?
Hello. Hi, from Global TV Brazil. How many countries agree with India, are with India at this moment? People say there is a few countries.
I can only say, without giving you the numbers, because that will be inappropriate. We are not having a vote here. But if you ask, the true answer is that the overwhelming majority of the countries, the groups, which are the countries which are emerging and developing countries, have coming to Bali reduced the number of these countries overnight? They know, but some countries have to speak up. And those countries who have spoken up yesterday in the plenary and in the ministerial meeting convened by the chair and the DG, I can only tell you that they account for more than 2/3 of the population of the world. These are the countries.
Yes, the gentleman here, please, on the third row.
Okay.
I forgot to answer one part. I've had consultation with other ministers, with the Africa Group, the LDCs. We've had consultations with the DG and the IPSA Group, and also with the host country, with EU. My officials can give the list of the meetings that we have had. It's fairly a large number. So we are engaged in a very meaningful and constructive manner.
Ben Youssouf, journaliste au Burkina Faso.
Journalist from Burkina Faso. Yesterday, we read a statement which was said to come from India, where we were wondering who is therefore going to make the Bali meeting collapse. What answer can you give to this question?
I think such language is not conducive. These are high-sounding words which are very frightening. There's not going to be a collapse. The WTO survives. There have been past meetings when no result was there. Then shall we say that those who collapsed those previous meetings, we are not come here to collapse any meeting. India is committed to a positive outcome in Bali. India is committed, but also to a balanced and fair outcome. And I am making it clear, particularly with regard to public stock holding for food security. I am limiting myself now to that. On that, it has to be a fair and balanced agreement. It is better to have no agreement than to have a bad agreement.
Yes, the gentleman in the blue shirt who was raising his hand just now. Yes, at the back, please. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Sam Reeves from AFP News Agency. You've hardened your stance considerably, but what reaction are you getting from the US? Is there any sign of them backing down, and are they the main obstacle to an agreement as far as you see?
Well, I'm seeking a mature understanding with the US, EU, and other developed countries.
Pooja, please. Can we have the mic here on the front row, please? Front row, the lady in white. Thank you.
Pooja from the Hindu, Delhi. There are reports that the Indonesian president is going to speak with Prime Minister Manmohan Singh today. Do you think you have room for change in your stand, or how is this telephone call going to change things here in Bali?
You see, it would not be proper for me to make an official statement as India's minister and the leader of the Indian delegation based on a newspaper report which is unconfirmed. The heads of states and the heads of government do speak with each other in normal course. The President of Indonesia is a good friend of India. Indonesia is India's strategic partner. We are together in the East Asia Summit countries. We have annual summits. I was here in Indonesia 3 months before with my Prime Minister, or less than 3 months before, for a summit between my Prime Minister and the Honorable President of Indonesia, Sri Bambang Susilo Yudhoyono. And it was Indonesia's president in his speech in the official delegation level talks very strongly spoken on the right to food security. Or the countries with large population must feed the poor, they must not go hungry, and whatever agreement is reached in WTO, it should be fair to our countries and to the poor people. That has been his position, and the President of Indonesia, my Prime Minister, on this issue have always been on the same page.
Yes, the gentleman in the middle, please.
Hi, it's Sean Donnan from the Financial Times. Can you tell us if you've met with Mike Froman yet, or if you have any plans to meet with Mike Froman over the next day or two? And do you believe that the process that is now underway, under which the Director General is drafting a compromise text, is a process that will reach a solution? Is it the right process?
First of all, India is open to meeting any minister and the leader of the delegation. Surely, if Mr. Froman wishes to meet with me, I am more than willing to do so. US for India is a valued partner. We have a relationship which embraces truly strategic sectors. We cannot view our relationship with the United States of America as two largest democracies of the world in a small, isolated manner, nor allow one issue to affect the relationship. We have a fundamental concern, we have an issue, and we are seeking the understanding of all. This is not a matter which is trade, which can be traded away.
Yes, the lady here. Just a moment. Please take the mic.
Hi there, Lisa Oak from CNBC. Can you hear me? you've presented your issues, and I'm just wondering, in your opinion, do you think that you're going to be able to get this resolved before the end of these meetings here in Bali?
Hear us, not the words, but the subject. I remain optimistic that we are being most reasonable. We are only asking, please bring the price, change the prices, please have an agreement that is fair, which is balanced.
Yes, please.
That gentleman is here, the one in the blue tie for long.
Nanima from Business Standard, New Delhi. Just to understand, some countries are blaming India that it is using its food security program to export food at cheaper prices and thus distorting trade. Would you like to clear the air on that?
Yes, I think this subject has been raised with me. I recall with clarity when we were in Geneva in the month of May. This question was put to us, and subsequently when we went for the government dialogue to Washington, that was in the month of July. I'll tell you what the answer I gave. We have a public procurement of food grains using public funds for stock holding, for distribution among the people entitled for food security. The stocks such procured using this public money cannot be given to trade for export purposes. If anybody ever even tries to do that, before the cargo reaches the port, the individual or individuals concerned should be in the nearest prison cell.
The gentleman with the blue tie, please. Second row. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. The previous question sort of touched upon the one I wanted to ask.
May I request you to please identify yourself?
Excuse me. Daniel Prusen with Bloomberg BNA in Geneva. Thank you, Minister. I just wanted to follow up a bit on the question that my colleague posed about distortions in the market. Your critics are saying that this debate is not about food security, but about preventing food dumping. India is the world's biggest exporter of rice, for example. Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah, I'll speak up louder, I apologize. Yes, India is the biggest exporter of rice in the world and has record stocks of both rice and wheat. Now? Someone's cutting me off. The government agency recently announced a tender for wheat of 2 million tons at a reduced price. Don't your critics have a point in saying that they have legitimate concerns about the distortive impact of India's policies, particularly Pakistan, your neighbor, which has been the most critical of India's policies, and shouldn't these concerns be taken into account? Thank you.
Second part of your question on wheat or tender, that is not correct. Tenders are invited, that means quotation of prices. Because when people trade, they always rates which are quoted, and they are global benchmarks. Countries would buy or import what they think they need. I don't have any issues with Pakistan on this front. Pakistan exports rice, India exports rice. But the basmati rice, there is not even a public procurement. That is a high quality rice which is never procured for food security or for public distribution in a subsidized manner. So that is not there. Now when it comes to stock holding, it has to be put again in the correct perspective. I would like to take you back to my opening statement when I said that under the public procurement, for public stock holding, it is only a percentage of the total food grains produced in India, including rice and wheat, which is procured by the state for subsidized food distribution under food security entitlements. By all accounts, it has never crossed 30% of the food grain produced by the Indian farmers. 70% of what India produces goes to the market, domestic market primarily for trading purposes. Because if we produce 160 million tons, then 30% of that you can calculate. The rest is open market trading, like in any country. And part of it gets exported. Why should anybody quarrel? There was a time many decades ago when I was a small child, my country had to go with a kind of a begging bowl. We were not self-sufficient in food grains. We were dependent on PL 480 program, and that is why the then Prime Minister of India, Indira Gandhi, called the agricultural scientist and one of the world-renowned ones, Dr. Swaminathan, and said that what it will take to produce X million tons of food so that India is not dependent. I am proud of Indian farmers, our agricultural scientists, and the people that today they produce enough to feed India and they help other countries which are in need.
Yes, the lady at the back, please.
Hello, sir. I'm Hera from Bloomberg TV Indonesia. I would like to ask you that is India now are alone? Because everybody always say India and United States. Where is the other countries, including Indonesia in G33? You're just like struggling by yourself about this point about agriculture points. Is that true?
That is not true. I can only say that you are not privy to the closed negotiations and the number of countries. I would rather update my own number because I was just in my head calculating the population of the countries which have stood up and spoken. These are all big countries with huge populations. And I can say that in that context, it may be more than 75% of the world's population lives in those countries who stand by India on this issue.
Yes, please.
Merci. Finalement.
Thank you. We're here as observers, and I'd like to ask, yes, the WTO, is it against development of poor countries?
Member of the press, I'm sorry, the minister will not be able to take your questions.
Yes, I am a member of the press. I'm from Benin, and I'm part of our daily press in Benin. What I'm asking is, if the WTO, in fact, is against the development of poor countries, I don't understand. The minister is explaining in detail to us what the problem is. What is it that's pitting you against other countries? Why is there opposition? Why is everyone pointing the finger at India? Can you tell us in detail?
This question, with all respect to you, I have said what is the issue. I have repeatedly mentioned that there are differences on this issue in approach, in understanding, and negotiations are meant for that. WTO as a body is not negotiating. Member countries of the WTO are negotiating. Thank you.
Yes, the lady on the second row, please. The lady on the second row. On the second row? In green? Yes, thank you.
I'm Linda from Indonesia's English daily, the Jakarta Post. Minister Sharma, you are demanding that the interim arrangement for the agriculture subsidy should be linked to a permanent solution, which requires the changes of the WTO agriculture agreement. So what kind of interim solution do you want if it is not the four-year peace clause?
I will answer. First of all, India never sought a peace clause. It is being erroneously referred to as one. We are not having a war here. We are having negotiations. So why are we negotiating for peace? We are mature nations. We may come from different levels of development. Negotiations are meant for this purpose, to build a consensus. Now your main question is about the interim solution. Let me help you. My understanding of English language is following. That interim is meant for the present, interim is meant for the intervening period until the permanent is put in place. Interim cannot be, there is no dictionary meaning which describes interim as temporary. Am I correct? Interim is interim until the permanent is put in place. The draft makes it clear, the DG's drafts, which have been negotiated in Geneva, that the parties will commit to engage in negotiations for a permanent solution. But all I am saying, India is saying, other countries are saying, and I must say other countries too, because both from Asia, Africa and South America's big countries have spoken up that this is a must-have for us. So we are only saying, how can there be a sunset clause when you have binding commitments in TF and interim is described as 4 years? I cannot, my teachers were good, I cannot accept this as a new dictionary meaning of the word interim.
Okay, we have time for one last question, please. The gentleman here, please. I'm sorry I've already called. Yes. Please, just a moment, sir. Yes, please. Please take the mic.
Hi, thanks. My name is Doug Palmer. I work for Politico in Washington, D.C. This week, and even in the weeks leading up to the meeting in Bali, we've heard a number of dire predictions about the future of the WTO if a deal isn't reached this week, that the negotiating arm will basically wither away. Just what is your response? I mean, what future do you see for the WTO if there's
WTO does have a good future. How can you say that heavens will fall if out of 10 texts proposed, 8 are adopted and 2 have to be negotiated so that there is a correct balance? Nothing is going to happen. I do not know why this gloomy scenario is being painted. Only if I sign away as a country our principles and the right to food security of the poor people, then only the WTO will be saved. Strengthening of WTO is a shared responsibility of all the members, developed countries as well as developing countries. Those who are speaking up for the poor and hungry people cannot be blamed.
With that, we come to the end of today's press conference. I'd like to thank you all for being here.